Pete Weber has had one of the greatest careers in all of PBA history. The numbers speak for themselves. 37 tour titles, 10 majors, which ties second on the list with Earl Anthony, and of course a 5-time US Open champion. He is one of the greats of the game, and despite how amazing his career was, it definitely wasn't all smooth sailing. There were some bumps in the road and some ups and downs. But the thing that makes Weber such a great of the game is how he was able to overcome these problems and at times adversities to bounce back and show why he's one of the best ever in the game. Because he managed to revive his career not once, not twice, but 3 times. And that takes a lot. That takes a lot of not just talent, but a hell of a lot of determination as well. So in this video, I'm going to look at the career of Pete Weber, but specifically focus on the 3 points in his career where things did go wrong for him, but most importantly, look at how he was able to overcome these issues and bounce back to win more titles and begin dominating on the PBA once again. So let's start by just doing a brief recap of the start of Weber's career, because as a young prodigy, he came in and had an immediate impact on the PBA Tour, winning 2 titles in 1982. This of course meant that himself and his father Dick Weber were the first father and son duo to ever win a PBA title on the main tour. And despite Weber's young age, he showed he had the ability to be a force on the tour, and after those 2 wins in 82, his career would really take off with another 2 wins in 84, a win in 85 at the Showboat Invitational, 3 wins in 1985, 2 wins in 86, and then he finally won his first major in 1987 at the Tournament of Champions, and this meant that he was the youngest player to ever reach the 10 title mark at 24 years and 247 days. Things continued to go from strength to strength for Weber as he won his 2nd major in 88 at the US Open, his 3rd in 89 at the National Championship, and continued this fantastic form into the 90s, winning 2 titles in 1990, 3 titles in 91, including the 91 US Open, the 92 Touring Players Championship, and 2 wins in 1993. But it's at this point we need to pause and talk about the first time Weber faced some problems in his career, because up until now, it had been a blistering start for him. 20 titles in 11 years. The tour around this time was changing. Well, in fact, the whole game was changing due to the introduction of reactive bowling balls. And it definitely caused issues for a lot of players who struggled to adapt after being so used to using urethane for so long, and then suddenly you had these reactive balls that were just hooking off the lane. You know, it was giving players the ability to create reaction like they'd never seen, like they'd never been able to do before, and it just opened up the ability for other players to suddenly come in and start to dominate the tour. And Weber himself said that when they came out in 1994, I had a really good year. In 1995, however, they started oiling boards rather than the lane, and this created a really wet-dry condition. When the ball was in the oil, it wouldn't move, but as soon as it hit the dry, it would go bananas. I was ready to quit the tour in 1995. I made $4,500 for the entire year on the national tour. The only thing that kept me alive was that I made $45,000 in the regional events. So as you can see, there was a big issue for Weber in 1995. His career really came to a halt, and although he said he felt he had a good year in 94, it didn't actually result in any wins, with the last win coming in 1993 at the Japan Cup. So I think that there was an element of him having to learn how to use reactive to suit his game, but from what he said, the main issue is when the PBA started to change how they were oiling the lanes, oiling boards rather than the lane. So that seemed to be the main issue for him. So what did he do to try and fix that? Because as we just heard, he was very close to actually leaving the tour. But apparently his brother Rich got in touch with him and said that in order to be successful, he had to learn how to get the ball to roll more end over end. And then Pete put a lot of work in to learn how to stay behind the ball. He said himself that he had to then learn again how to throw these new bowling balls. But once he learnt it and understood it, then things started to click. But it still took a long time from 1995, because although he came close to winning, losing in 2 title matches in 1996, it wasn't until 1997 that things really started to come alive again for Webber. Because in 97 he won 2 titles and also lost in 4 title matches as well. And on top of that, had a number of top 5 finishes too. So once he took that time in 95 and 96 to really learn how to throw these reactive balls and to change his game, change his release, once he got that, then the results started to come back and he started to win again on the tour. So in this case, he managed to revive his career by stepping back, looking at his game, looking at his release and putting a lot of work in to change and adapt it to fit the conditions of the time. And if he hadn't have been able to do that, it's very possible he could have fallen off the tour. So after those 2 wins in 97, he won again in 98 at the National Championship. But in 1999, his career hit another bump. At the end of 1999, there was an incident at a Pro-Am event that was apparently related to his drinking problem, and he was therefore suspended in the year 2000. And that suspension would last for the remainder of the year 2000, so it was a pretty hefty suspension. But during that same year, there was a lot of changes going on with the PBA because it was sold to 3 former Microsoft executives. So during this time, they were considering how they could reignite popularity in bowling and the PBA because it was on a downturn. They wanted to try and do something to get the ratings back up, to get people interested again in the sport. And it was decided that Pete Webber could be used as a tool to really market the PBA to an entire new audience, because up until that point, he'd always been somebody who wore his heart on his sleeve when on TV. But the idea was to take that, to take his expressiveness, his celebrations, and just dial that up to a whole other level. And he was encouraged to just be himself on TV and to really be animated. And he already was very animated, but was encouraged to be even more so. And so this opportunity really did revive Webber's career once again. Because then in the 01-02 season, suddenly his career exploded back into life as he won 3 tour titles in that season alone. And there were some great moments in there as well, defeating Michael Haugen Jr. in a very exciting match, 289 to 279. Also him bowling a 299 game on TV as well. And that's when we started to see his famous crotch chop introduced as well. There's no other way to say it, but he was just great TV, great fun to watch. And yes, it rubbed some people up the wrong way, but the goal of the PBA was to create something new, something exciting, and to get people interested in it again. And that's exactly what happened. Whenever Webber was on TV, it didn't matter whether you liked him or you didn't, you would watch him. So once again, his career was revived, but this time it was thanks to a fortuitous change in the PBA and somebody there seeing an opportunity with Webber. But you can't take away from the fact that he still had to put the performances in, but obviously this was a golden chance that he took full advantage of. And after that, he continued to have a really steady career in the 2000s, winning his 3rd US Open in 2004, again winning a title in 02, 03, 2 titles in 04, a title in 05, a title in 06, and then his 4th US Open title in 2007. But at this point, again, we have to pause, as this was the 3rd time now that his career would hit a pretty big bump in the road. After that 07 win, he suddenly started to have a lot of struggles on TV. and he was making so many shows. He had a loss in the title match of the 08 Geico Classic and also 3 other top 5 finishes. But every time we saw him on TV in that period of 2008-2009, he just looked off. He wasn't himself. You know, he had lost a lot of confidence on TV because of the struggles that he was starting to have. Nothing was really going right for him. Nothing was flowing. Everything felt very deliberate, and I've done a video on this before looking at a deep dive of how his physical game was changing at that point as well, and how before there was an effortless feel to his game. That had gone. Everything was difficult for him whenever he made a TV show. He had another loss in the title match of the 09 Plastic Ball Championship and top 5 finishes at the Motor City Open, the Marathon Open and the Dick Weber Open as well in the same year. 2010, his struggles continued with a top 5 at the Tournament of Champions, again a top 5 at the Dick Weber Open as well. And it just seemed like this could be the end of his career in terms of would he win another title? That was the big question. Because he was still able to be very competitive, obviously, 08, 09, 2010, making a lot of TV shows, but he was struggling to win a match, let alone a title. And by that point, he was in his late 40s. So the question was, how many more opportunities was he going to get? But finally, he managed to break a 3-year title drought when he won the 2010 Marathon Open, defeating Brad Angelo in the semi-final and then putting on a fantastic display in the final to defeat Mike Scroggins. And this win is really what I feel reignited his career for a 3rd time, because after that he would go on to win the 2012 US Open, which of course is the famous "Who do you think you are, I am" moment, which became a defining moment not just in his career, but I would say a defining moment of the PBA, certainly in the last 20 or 30 years. It's just such an iconic moment. And then he went on to win the 2013 Tournament of Champions. But I feel that without that win in 2010, I don't think he would have necessarily won the US Open or indeed the Tournament of Champions. Because imagine if he didn't have that win and that title drought that started in 07 continued. Well, suddenly, with a 5-year title drought, who knows whether he even makes the telecast of the US Open? You just don't know. But I think that win in 2010 100% gave him the confidence so that he knew that he could win again, and that when he was in that pressure situation throughout the US Open telecast, when he ran the ladder, he was able to hold his nerve and win the title. And even though the 2013 Tournament of Champions would be his last victory on the tour, he still had one hell of a finish to his career in terms of his performances, particularly in the majors. He was just having so many top 5 finishes. He had a top 5 finish in the 2013 US Open and World Championship, a top 5 in the 2014 Tournament of Champions, again the 2015 USBC Masters and US Open, and the 2017 Tournament of Champions. So even after that 2013 win, for a good 4 years afterwards, he was still really competitive on the tour and making telecasts in the majors. And I think he had a lot of motivation, particularly in the majors, because he had tied Earl Anthony with 10 majors, and I think he was desperately trying to win an 11th. And he certainly had a lot of opportunities to get that 11th major. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, but he definitely finished his career on a big high, and I felt that was a real revival in his career for the 3rd time after that long 3-year title drought. So that is going to bring us to an end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed this one, and if you have, I would really appreciate it if you would hit the subscribe button below. If you've got any other suggestions for similar videos like this, where you want me to look back at a player's career, then please let me know your suggestions in the comment section below. Well, that's going to do it from me for today, and as always, thank you, bowling fans, and see you all next time.